Are removed from the ruins of Loafers Lodge as a man appears in court charged with arson. A budget downer for nursing students sick of being on the wait list for more financial support. Why isn't everyone getting a cheap ride? Minister Michael Wood breaks down the details of the government's public transport package. The overlooked budget bonus, half-price electricity, will tell you where. Spoiler alert, don't get too excited. There's nothing fab about the beetles found in a Kmart tray. And our reporter Louise Tanu sniffs out a cracker of a yarn. Cute canines saving Kauri trees. You can watch us live on the RNZ website, Facebook and Freeview Channel 50. RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahiahi Mārie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. 5 people have been confirmed dead in the Loafers Lodge fire in the capital, and police now say the final toll is likely to be fewer than 10. Acting Wellington District Commander Inspector Dion Bennett says 4 bodies have now been removed from the lodge in the suburb of Newtown. Speaking to media this afternoon, he said the building is still too dangerous to get the 5th body out safely.
The scene examination in itself, and in the 3rd floor in particular, it is quite dangerous, and there are still parts of that floor that we can't cross because of the danger posed by it. So that's one of the contributing factors for being unable to recover that person at this stage.
Dion Bennett says urban search and rescue teams have been propping up the floor beneath to keep the search teams from falling through as they move through the building. A woman who works in Newtown says the mood in the suburb has been sombre this week. RNZ understands many Loafers Lodge residents were a strong part of the suburb's community. The woman recently reunited with a resident she hadn't seen since the fire and was relieved to know they were safe.
Yeah, just walking down the street today. Hello. Yeah, good to see you. But there's still the missing gaps, the missing faces, and that's hard.
She says the community has been spending time inside shops in Newtown, wanting to talk about the fire and support each other. Nearly $250,000 of donations have been given to support those affected by the fatal blaze. The Mayoral Relief Fund currently sits at $245,000, with $50,000 coming from Wellington City Council. So far, about $18,000 in support has been given to more than 30 people. Around 100 people lived at the hostel. Wellington City Missioner Murray Edridge says Loafers Lodge housed some of Wellington's most vulnerable people, and the response from the community has been outstanding. Wellington Mayor Tori Whanau urged those who can afford to contribute to do so. The government is defending its decision to provide only specific groups with cost of living support in this year's budget. Young families, some public transport users and the sick receive some financial assistance, but those over 25 without children receive very little. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says he had to weigh up providing support and fuelling inflation.
We have to strike a balance here. We've done a number of large-scale supports for cost of living. For example, the cost of living payment last year. This is the right time, in my view, for more targeted approaches.
Some economists have warned the government's increased spending in this year's budget could make inflation worse. The National Emergency Management Agency is warning boaties to return to shore and others to watch out for strong and unusual currents in the wake of a massive earthquake near New Caledonia. The 7.7 magnitude quake just before 4 o'clock has triggered warnings for people in New Caledonia, Fiji and Vanuatu to move to higher ground. New Zealand authorities say there's a danger to swimmers, surfers and fishers, and people should stay away from beaches, harbours, marinas, rivers and estuaries. Areas under threat include both coasts of the North Island, from Cape Dainga to Whanganui and down to Tolaga Bay on the east coast. The west coast of the South Island, from Farewell Spit to Milford Sound, is also included in the warning. And the 2 men arrested in Auckland after a teenage girl was shot in an act of road rage have been granted interim name suppression. The pair appeared in district court today, jointly charged with wounding with reckless disregard and injuring with reckless disregard. One of them has also been charged with unlawful possession of ammunition. The charges stem from a pursuit on Tuesday night of more than 10 kilometres before a 15-year-old girl in a minivan was shot after it was fired on from a hatchback car. The pair were remanded in custody until their next appearances at the end of the month. To sport now, and Blues lock Patrick Tuipolotu says players are constantly working on their tackle techniques as they prepare for their finals push without skipper Dalton Papali'i. Papali'i has been suspended for 3 weeks after making contact with Crusaders' first five Richie Mo'unga's head last round. Tuipolotu will captain the side against the Reds in Brisbane tonight.
It's all about player safety, and that's at the forefront of why he's been banned, and what we're trying to do to improve on the head knock space. So, look, we can't do much about it, but get our technique as perfect as we can, and it's always going to be a work on. It's not always going to be perfect.
The fifth-placed Blues are looking to bounce back from last week's loss to the Crusaders, who are hosting Moana Pacifica in Christchurch tonight. Reigning UFC middleweight Israel Adesanya has ruled out any chance of fighting in New Zealand anytime soon. The New Zealander says until certain apologies are made, he'll continue to fight abroad.
It's not coming to NZ for a while, and I think, we have other guys like Kai, Dan, even Volk, plenty of superstars, Carlos, who can headline over here. I don't have to headline here.
And New Zealand squash player Joelle King survived a 5-game thriller to beat England's Jasmine Hutton and advance to the quarterfinals at the Manchester Open. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, how the failed quest for herd immunity led doctors to embrace the anti-vaccine movement is the subtitle of American Dr. Jonathan Howard's angry book. Robert Bartholomew on what the so-called Havana syndrome really was. And the winner of the Auckland New Zealand Book Award for Fiction, Catherine Chidgey. Ko Kim Hilaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. A tsunami marine advisory is in effect for northern and western coasts of the North Island and for the western coasts of the South Island. Expect strong and unusual currents and unpredictable surges at the shore. Please refer to civildefence.govt.nz for details and updates. From Northland to Taranaki, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy. Possible thunderstorms in the west overnight and tomorrow. Gale northwesterlies in exposed places overnight and tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine spells, a few showers. Whanganui to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Partly cloudy with the odd shower, turning to rain at times tomorrow. Buller, Nelson and Marlborough, scattered rain, more widespread and possibly heavy about western Tasman. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, periods of rain or drizzle and low cloud or fog at times. Westland and Fiordland, partly cloudy with scattered rain at times, but just the odd shower about the fjords. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, a few showers today. Tomorrow, periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery with northeast gales. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at around 20 past 5.
Ngā mihi Evie, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. As specialist teams were removing 2 more bodies from the charred ruins of Loafers Lodge, a man was appearing in court charged with arson over the fire that killed them. 4 bodies have now been removed from the hostel where a number of people died in an early morning blaze this week. The remains of 2 people were taken to Wellington Hospital mortuary today, and work will continue over the weekend to extract another. Jemima Houston reports.
Residents of the Wellington suburb of Newtown are still reeling from the deaths of a number of locals. One woman working just down the road from the fire site says it has hit them hard.
Depressed, slow, emotional. It's a very dampened atmosphere.
She recently reunited with a Loafers Lodge resident she hadn't seen since the fire and was relieved to know they were safe.
Yeah, just walking down the street today. Hello. Yeah. Well, yeah, good to see you. But there's still the missing gaps, the missing faces, and that's hard.
Locals are still shocked that the Loafers Lodge wasn't legally required to have sprinklers. A cafe worker says the fire made her rethink about the fire safety protections in her own home.
My fire alarm in my house doesn't work. We took it down. So it's instantly we need to put fire alarms up. We need to make sure we're on top of things. We know our fire exits. We have a tiny window in my bedroom we all have to shimmy out of.
But she says the fire has pulled the community closer together.
It was definitely quieter, solemn. I think everyone kind of had a sense of community and worrying and concern for everyone, especially with the lives lost, which is so heartbreaking.
A man in his 40s has appeared at the Wellington District Court today and has been charged with 2 counts of arson. The judge issued interim name suppression and the man was remanded in custody. Outside the court, Daryl Smith says he was there to represent the community.
The survivors are not there, and I thought, well, I'll go there represent my friend, but I just want to make sure that they get the, get the help they deserve.
Daryl Smith says the current charges don't reflect the loss of life.
Because you know intentionally what you're doing, you lose other lives there, so you intentionally put all those people's lives at harm's way.
Police this afternoon said 5 people have been confirmed dead and the death toll is likely to be fewer than 10. Acting Wellington District Commander, Inspector Dion Bennett, says 4 of those bodies have now been removed from the lodge. He says the building is still too dangerous to be able to safely get the 5th body out.
The scene examination in itself, and in the 3rd floor in particular, it is quite dangerous, and there are still parts of that floor that we can't cross because of the danger posed by it. So that's one of the contributing factors for being unable to recover that person at this stage.
As police slowly move through the building, urban search and rescue teams have been propping up the floor to keep the search teams from falling through. Meanwhile, nearly $250,000 of donations have been given to support those affected by the fatal Wellington Hostel fire. Wellington Mayor Tory Whānau is deeply appreciative of those who have donated and urged those who can afford to contribute to do so.
That report from Jemima Houston. It is 10 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The government is defending its decision to provide only specific groups with cost of living support in this year's budget. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says he had to weigh up providing support and fuelling inflation. Meanwhile, National has walked back its promise to reintroduce prescription charges. Kind of. Here's our political reporter Katie Scotcher.
New Zealanders are doing it tough, and that was front of mind as the Finance Minister pulled together his no-frills budget.
We needed to continue to support New Zealanders with the increasing cost of living.
But Grant Robertson also knew any government support could fuel inflation and make the problem worse. So he opted to dish out targeted assistance to young families, the sick and some public transport users. That means if you're over 25 and have no children, there's little in this year's budget to help ease the cost of living for you. In fact, soon day-to-day costs will become even more expensive, with public transport and fuel set to return to full price from the end of June.
We have to strike a balance here. We've done a number of large-scale supports for cost of living. For example, the cost of living payment last year. This is the right time, in my view, for more targeted approaches.
But this, of course, is an election year, and there's still plenty of time for further cost of living support to be promised.
When we get to the election, we'll have election policies.
The National Party wants to deliver support in the way of tax cuts. Its leader, Christopher Luxon, met with party faithful this morning and expressed his disappointment they weren't part of yesterday's budget.
If you are a hard-working Kiwi, there's actually not a lot of tax relief in here for you.
Budget 2023 puts the National Party in a difficult position, forcing it to explain what it will cut to pay for its promised tax cuts. We've already seen a policy cut flip-flop within 24 hours of the budget being released. Yesterday, National promised to reintroduce prescription fees, which the government scrapped at a cost of almost $620 million. Here's the party's finance spokesperson, Nicola Willis, speaking on Checkpoint last night.
I think a lot of us would have sympathy with the idea that those on particularly low incomes or with very high health needs might need some help there. There are targeted ways already which provide that help. And I just think of the chemist warehouse. They're already offering free prescriptions. So is this a big subsidy for them?
Now National has changed its tune, with Mr Luxon promising to keep the discount for people with community service and gold cards.
So I don't think it makes a lot of sense that someone like me gets the benefit of that. But I do think there is need for targeted support to those that most desperately need it. And so what I would want to see is more targeting. What we will do is have a targeted program to support people in need that would be of a huge benefit to. We think there's a real need for that.
National is promising to release its fully costed tax and fiscal plans closer to the election.
And councils are getting $140 million of incentives to bolster public transport services. It's part of the budget package that will see under 13s ride for free and under 25s getting half-price fares. A rejig of the government's cost of living package offering half-price public transport for everyone for a limited time. On top of that, there's $140 million of funding for councils to restore public transport to pre-pandemic levels and bring back cancelled services. Auckland Transport's been slammed for cancelling up to 1,000 bus trips a day, due mainly to driver shortages. First off, Transport Minister Michael Wood explains how the new cut price fares will work.
The way this works is that the government makes the funding available for local councils who are the ones who are responsible for delivering public transport services. So they'll deliver it in a way that works within their own areas, and they'll be working through that over the next couple of months to roll out these discounts as soon as possible.
So every district could have a different system?
Yeah, potentially. People might remember that late last year we announced the national ticketing solution, where we are moving the country towards one public transport system and card. We don't have that yet. So as things stand, each local council area has their own public transport system. You have a hop card in one place and a snapper card in another place, a B card in another place, and councils will look to deliver it in a local way.
So people are asking the question as to why not everyone is getting half-price fares. And can you tell us, please, how does this package compare to the cost of keeping half-price fares for absolutely everybody?
Well, this is a budget in which we have said pretty openly that we are having to cut our cloth, and we're trying to make sure that in areas where we're spending, we're getting the best benefit through to people. So we've targeted it where we think it will make the biggest difference, both in terms of taking off costs for households, but also in terms of encouraging people into public transport, particularly young people. Some of the earlier modelling that we did suggested that compared to, say, half-price public transport for under 25s, you'd have to roughly double that to get to the cost of what it would be to give that for everyone across the system. And the thing
so
about
in
this
real
budget,
Money, Minister, wasn't it about $150 million a year?
Yes, that's right.
For everyone to get half price, right?
No, it would be more. It would be more than that in total, I believe.
Okay. Have you got a figure?
Well, that's about what we were paying per year for these 130 to 140 for the half-price public transport for the system, but it would cost more for the whole population.
So the package as it stands, with the discounts that you are offering in the budget public transport package announced yesterday, what does that cost?
So we have a number of different components to the public transport package. There's around about $320 million over the period for the lowering of fares. Around about $50 million goes into boosting bus driver pay and conditions.
Let's just stick with fares for the moment, Minister, so that we can get a like-for-like comparison. Giving cut price fares to everybody would cost $150 million a year, you've told us. So giving cut price fares to some people and free transport to some people costs what? $320 million a year?
$320 million, and that's over the 4-year period. So you can look at around about a quarter of that, or around about $80 million per year, give or take, which is roughly your annual cost for delivering that benefit to Kiwi households.
Okay, let's now talk about the other things you are doing to bolster public transport. Because people, they think it's unreliable, and in Auckland and other places, it is. So what are you doing about that?
So two important things in the budget. The first is making sure that we are able to attract and retain the drivers we need. That's been the main driver of unreliable public transport. We put about $60 million in the budget last year, and that's now reducing the shortfall. We've reduced the shortfall of drivers from about 860 at the end of last year to about 460 now. And there's further funding in this budget, about $50 million, which will effectively complete the process of lifting bus driver pay and conditions, and is going to be really important in terms of stabilising the workforce, getting the services back to where they need to be, because people need PT to be reliable.
Okay, so that's to get people into the profession. You can't put on more buses until you get drivers. So what is this money that you are giving to councils to encourage them to bring back services to pre-pandemic levels, and also to encourage them to bring back cancelled services? How much, for example, is Auckland getting?
Yes, this is a really important part of the package. Overall, it's about $140 million to support waka kotahi and councils with the delivery of public transport services. Because of the impact of COVID, they've effectively had less fare box revenue coming in to support public transport, and that's left deficits. So what we're doing with this funding, and it's pretty much proportional to each region depending on how much of the public transport happens in each region. So Auckland, for example, it's about 57% of the total public transport trips. So that's about the percentage of funding that will go there. And that funding will go there to support them to rebuild their services following some of the cuts and reductions that we've had over the last year.
So about $80 million for Auckland. And I mean, how does giving them that money bring back more bus services if they don't have drivers?
Well, as we've just discussed, we're doing all of the above. We're supporting cheaper fares.
But they don't have the drivers yet, Minister. I understand that is in train, but they do not have the volume of drivers that they need. So giving them this money to increase services, well, they can't until they have the drivers.
Well, we're doing both of those things at the same time because you're right. If we just did one, it wouldn't work. The investment that is going into drivers now from the budget last year, and it is making a difference. As I said, we've reduced that shortfall of drivers over the last 6 months from about 860 positions to about 460 positions. So there's more work to do, but we're beginning to make real headway there. And this additional investment will help with that over the coming months as councils gear up to begin to put back some of those services that they have pulled back on. So we're looking at this from all angles, support for their balance sheet, support for driver wages, and also support for Kiwis to make it cheaper for them to get on the bus, train or ferry.
So that money, which is to shore up services, for example, in Auckland, $80 million, does Auckland Council have that money now? When are they getting it?
Well, this is money which will be able to be applied when we get into the government's new financial year, which kicks in from the 1st of July this year.
And that is the Transport Minister, Michael Wood there. Interested in your thoughts on that one. So it would have cost about $150 million to offer everybody cut price fares and around $80 million a year for the package that they have announced in the budget yesterday. Which do you prefer? 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, 5:20, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Text again is 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie's here with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
The Finance Minister has defended the spending announced in yesterday's budget, saying that it needed to be mindful of inflation while trying to address the cost of living pressures. There was little in the budget for people over 25 with no children. The government instead dishing out assistance to young families and the sick while investing in infrastructure. Grant Robertson says that he needed to target the people he could help the most within financial constraints. The National Party's leader also says there's a need for more targeted spending, as he today reversed the party's position on reintroducing prescription charges. The government scrapped the $5 charge in the budget, and National's deputy leader, Nicola Willis, told Checkpoint yesterday that free prescriptions weren't a priority for the party. But Christopher Luxon today said free prescriptions would likely remain for certain people under National, while those on low or fixed incomes. I'm missing a bit there. Wellington Police are concerned about the safety of their teams investigating the fatal Loafers Lodge Hostel fire earlier this week and say that's why they're taking their time recovering bodies. Inspector Dion Bennett says they have recovered 4 of the 5 bodies they've located in the hostel, but he says the building is still too dangerous to remove the 5th. He says fewer than 10 people remain unaccounted for. And a man charged with setting the fire has been remanded in custody following a court appearance this afternoon where he faced 2 charges of arson. Police say he still could face more charges. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Wellington, disruption because of the Newtown hostel fire continues. Through the weekend, Adelaide Road will remain open to southbound traffic only. Traffic detours will remain in place for northbound traffic, including for public transport. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 5:40.
Kia ora rā e ho. Golfer Ryan Fox has had a red-hot start to the US PGA in New York. Fox was leading the charge overnight and is now tied for 6th after carding a 2-under-par first round, 3 shots off the pace. Fox has had a disrupted build-up to his first tournament since the Masters in April.
For the most part, played pretty solid. There was some pretty scruffy iron shots in there and my short game saved me, and I rode a pretty hot putter today, which was nice. For the most part, when I was in trouble today, I was generally in trouble in the right place and managed to get it up and down or get myself out of trouble pretty nicely.
And we're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Rode a pretty hot putter today. Why was Fox so happy with this start?
Well, it's a kind of an against the odds situation. He hasn't played golf in the last month. He withdrew from the RBC Heritage Tournament in South Carolina with an illness at the time, which then turned out to be pneumonia. Has now come back to New Zealand, and he and his wife have had their second child, so that child was born here. So he's sort of been a little bit of a busy 4 weeks, which means he hasn't been able to get on the golf course. He's had this limited build-up, which meant it was only 2 practice rounds at the Oaks Hills course, which was all he had ahead of today's start. So I think he was pretty impressed with himself in that part, coming back into form quite quickly after that break. Also, today, even first thing this morning, things weren't really going his way. There was a 2-hour delay to the action on the course because of frost, but he'd kind of missed the memo. So he'd already left the hotel, showed up to the golf course early, and he was like waiting around. So he said, it would have been good to have that nap if he'd seen that email or text. Maybe he could have spent some more time in bed this morning rather than that. He's going to have an afternoon nap to make up for it, he says. But also, he's in pretty good company near the top of the leaderboard. It's an unheralded American, Eric Cole, who has actually taken the lead, and play was suspended due to light, again because of the delay earlier. And he's also got, and this is Live Golf isn't going away, Bryson DeChambeau is in second, Scotty Scheffler's there as well as Kauri, Connors and Dustin Johnson. So some pretty big names to be up floating around with at the top of the leaderboard there. And he's also had this unfortunate thing that happens to some successful New Zealanders. He got called an Australian twice today by the host broadcaster.
Eek. He would need to lie down in a nap after that. Okay, speaking of other big names, we'll move to a different code though. Tennis. Rafa Nadal has put a deadline on his professional career.
Yeah, it was a big day for Rafa. He announced today that he wouldn't be taking part in the French Open. He's had this hip injury that's bugged him since January at the Australian Open, and he hasn't been able to get back to full fitness, which is quite a big call due to his clay dominance. He's won 14 times at Roland Garros. But as he was sitting there saying that he wasn't going to be turning up to the French Open, he also said that he wouldn't be playing beyond next year. So it's 2024 is when he expects to wrap up his professional career. So this injury, he's saying that right at this moment, he's going to be taking a complete break from tennis. He wants to get back to full fitness so that he can fully focus on what I guess is the farewell season. He's not saying when he'll be back in terms of this year. So I'd imagine that we're looking closer to next year. So any hopes of seeing him in anything beyond the French Open this year also out of the picture. And he's sort of saying as well that he wants to bow out on his own terms. He doesn't want to be sitting, as he was today, in a press conference talking about how he's retiring from tennis. So he will be back on court. The 36-year-old is tied with Novak Djokovic on a men's record 22 Grand Slam titles. So there's probably a little bit of a motivation to win another one before he hangs it up.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Felicity. Felicity Reid there with sports. Auckland Transport's going to the dogs, literally. From next week, big dogs will be allowed on buses in the Supercity. T's and C's apply. It follows what AT's described as, and wait for it, the pawsome success of its first Pets on Buses trial. And that was for small domestic animals and carriers. Well, joining us now is Auckland Transport's Luke Clark. Hi, Luke. What's the aim here with this?
Hi, Lisa. After the successful trial we did with smaller pets in carriers that can fit on customers' laps on buses, we've had success, so we want to make that permanent. And now it's time for the next step, which is to try for a couple of months larger dogs on buses with muzzles and leads, and that's the cage-type muzzles.
Okay, and there are other terms and conditions if you want to take your bigger dog on to the bus. Can you tell us a bit about the restrictions and the etiquette expected?
Yep, sure. So you have to be over 16. Children can't do it. It's the same terms as the smaller dogs for times. So it's off-peak times after 9:30am in the morning, all weekends and all public holidays. Pets are not allowed on the seats and they're not allowed upstairs in double-decker buses. Full terms and conditions are on the AT website as well. There are a few rules, but they basically complement the rules we already have for trains.
What's considered a big dog, by the way?
Any dog that doesn't fit in a carrier on a customer's lap is considered big for this trial.
Okay, and if I bring my lovely, well-behaved dog on the bus and she does a poop, what's the deal then?
You are responsible for your own dog mess. What we have found on trains, we've been running this scheme for 4 years on trains, and we haven't had any accidents yet. So we hope that will be the same on buses as well.
Wow, not a single accident. Well, you've really jinxed it now, haven't you, Luke?
I have, yeah. Let's hope there isn't any next week.
So, I mean, okay, you're letting people bring their animals on, and they travel for free, I take it?
They do travel for free, yes.
Are you hoping this will encourage more people to utilise public transport because they can bring their buddy with them now?
Absolutely, it's part of it. We want to open up the network to as many people as possible, and there's probably customers out there that don't have cars that would like to travel with their pets, maybe to the vet, a supercard holder with their cat or dog, and now they've got another option. They can also travel on a train from Swanson and go all the way through to Waiheke Island onto another bus. So it opens up the whole city for everyone, for leisure and for other travel as well.
Anyone who's got a fur baby always thinks that theirs is great, right? But I'm just wondering how other people feel about animals on the bus, including the drivers.
Well, what we've done, we've been through a whole process with the drivers to advise them what we're doing, and that's why we've been taking baby steps. We did it first on trains, we started with the smaller pets, and now we've got bigger. And what we've also done in Auckland, which you'll find if ever you've been to Europe and you've seen pets on transport there, we've put in some extra measures for our customer safety and comfort in Auckland. So the larger dogs do have to have the cage-type muzzles and the leads, and the smaller pets do need to be in approved carriers. So we've just gone the extra step with safety in Auckland because we know what we are introducing, something new that people haven't seen before here.
So, your title says it all, your improvement delivery, right? And I'm just wondering, is this a priority when AT's got, endless cancellations of bus services? Is it really the time you want to be turning your bus service into Noah's Ark? Maybe getting back to basics, people might argue, is where you should be concentrating your efforts?
We did survey customers all the way through from the trial on trains as well. Most customers were very pleased to have pets on public transport like they do in Europe. With regards to the other parts, the other projects, we're working on those as well. This is just part of a longer project that's going on, and this is the last piece of the jigsaw.
Luke, have you got a dog?
I have, yes.
Have you given it a crack?
I have, yes. I was on filming yesterday with my very big dog. I've got a big bearded collie that's huge. So if you go onto our website, you can see him.
I think we're seeing him right now. What's his name?
He's Max. Yeah.
Max, and he, passed muster. He behaved himself.
Oh, he's a very good boy. You'll see his tail's wagging there as well. So, like the other dogs, he's very pleased to finally be allowed on a bus.
Appreciate your time, Luke. That's Luke Clark from Auckland Transport. They're really interested in your thoughts on that one. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is 29 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ko taku hoe I nai ko Nona Peltier. Nona is joining us to talk all things business. Let's talk about Ryman Health Care. Full year result didn't disappoint despite a drop in profit. Wow.
It was a big drop.
How's that not disappointing for people?
I don't really know, to be honest, but it was a 63% drop. And I guess it was because it was signaled, so it was somewhat expected. They're not paying a dividend. So from first glance, you would say, gee, that's not a great result. But the company has undertaken a new strategy. They've bolstered their balance sheet. They raised about $900 million through an issue of new shares in February. They have a new strategy so that they're changing the way that they develop villages, so it's more cost effective for them. And they're selling off pieces of development sites which are too small, say, to meet their new strategic plan. So overall, I guess the market was pretty accepting of that because the company's share price rose 8% today. And as a very large company on the NZX, that certainly made a difference in our our finish for the day. So. Yeah.
Okay, what about My Food Bag? Okay, they've got a big drop in profit too. What's the deal with that?
Another one. Yes, well, their share price fell. Their net profit fell 60%. That's 60.
60.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And they, but that said. So their profit was $7.9 million, which you would have thought would be fairly disappointing. But their share price rose 14% today. They're going to delist from the ASX market, where they've been dual listed, to save money. They've got a program in place to counter the effect of a drop in subscriptions, because they're the folks that deliver your, food bag it's a subscription-based service. So they have seen a drop. And I suppose after COVID, people are probably happy to go out or just go shopping and pick up their own goods. And as well, groceries and so on are a lot more expensive. So I suppose their costs have gone up as well.
And tell us about market numbers, please.
Right. So the top 50 index, it ended up 1% today, which is pretty darn good, because the Asian share market was a bit weaker and nudged lower. So New Zealand was an outperformer, if you'd want to put it that way. 124 points up to 12,100. And the Kiwi. Well, it's steady after yesterday's budget. And so despite all the naysayers, the Kiwi's sitting there at 62.4 US cents, 94 Australian and 50.3 pence. And that's despite the US dollar firming overnight.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with business. A woman who bought a wooden tray from Kmart in Northland got more than she bargained for when she discovered it contained wood-eating beetle. The $20 acacia serving tray is now being recalled after Michelle Reichardt alerted the Ministry for Primary Industries. It's been identified as Lyctus africanus, also known as the African powder post beetle. That doesn't sound good, does it? A species not found in New Zealand. Michelle told our producer, Matthew Tunison, what happened.
So I bought it back in February, end of February I bought it, and I bought it online, and I got it home and it came in the mail, opened it, and I put it on my stone top bench top, and it sat there for about, maybe a month or two. And my sister was having a function. I said, I've got a nice tray you could borrow, so I took it up to her house, and I always noticed it was kind of dusty, but I couldn't see any bore holes. So my sister borrowed it, and about a few weeks later she says to me, hey, Shell, this tray's got borer in it. And I was like, what? No way. And so I went up to her house, and I had a look. Sure enough, there were the little holes all through it. And she said, I've taken it out of the house because I don't want it in here. And she's put it outside on a metal barbecue table she has. And we both didn't really know what to do with it, so we sort of reached out to a few people on Facebook, and they're like, you need to make contact with MPI. And the next day I went back up there, and there was little dust coming out of one of the holes. So then I knew straight away they were active, they were live in there. So MPI wanted to see it straight away. I got in touch with Kmart, and they refunded me straight away the full price and said sorry that I wasn't satisfied with the product. And then didn't hear anything else from that. Then MPI rang me back a few weeks ago and said that it was an exotic bug. So I was totally shocked by that, because I didn't think it was going to come back, that it was some random bug that we've never had here in New Zealand.
An African powder post beetle, Michelle, is that what it was?
Yeah, well, she never said it was that. She said it was another, it had a technical term for
Lyctus africanus.
Yeah, something like that.
So it's a good thing you got in touch with MPI, isn't it? It doesn't sound like this is something we particularly want in New Zealand.
No, I wouldn't think so. Not at all.
And since then, Michelle, other people, I take it on Facebook, have been in touch saying that they've also had similar experiences to you.
Yeah, there's been the comments that I got off there was hundreds, and there were lots of other people with sort of the same thing. Others they had it in one was in a bamboo little drawer or something. One lady, she went on there and she had it in something, and she noticed it had borer. She threw it. She got rid of it, so it went into the rubbish. But I'm imagining, there must be more out there.
All right. Now I take it Kmart has withdrawn its line of wooden trays, which are related to the one that you purchased, which is a good thing, and a good thing you raised the alarm, Michelle.
Yeah, I guess so. I've got lots of wooden products in there, so I guess you just don't know. You can get platters and serveware. So, yeah.
Bit of a worry.
Yeah, just a bit. Especially when it's a bug that we don't have here in New Zealand. It could be devastating to our wood.
And that was our producer Matthew Tunison talking to Michelle Reichardt, who alerted MPI to the little invaders in her wooden tray. Now, the Ministry for Primary Industries says Kmart has recalled the trays pending further investigation, and the infested item has been securely destroyed. I'm just thinking, imagine if you'd put your little cheese snacks and everything on it. No new reports of borer activity have been notified. Let us know if you've got a tray that's got greeblets in it. We'd love to know. It is almost 20 to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now, because boy is it coming in on the dogs on buses. And it is a totally mixed bag. Pets on buses? No way, says this listener. Another says you may gain dog lovers on buses, but you will lose people who don't like them, like me. Back to the car. Peter says there is no way I'll get on a bus with a dog on board. This country has gone to the dogs. Try to find somewhere else to live. Time to find somewhere else to live. Yeah, but other people think differently. Dogs on buses, fantastic. Lovely face emoji. Dogs rule. Multiple explanation marks. People drool. And this one, yay for pets on public transport. When is this happening in Wellington? Alex from Wellington wants to know. Apparently it already happens on some. I don't know whether it's just small pets in Wellington. We'll try and find out. Dogs on trains, about time. Check out dogs in libraries, helps kids read. Pets improve life, create conversation and put smiles on most people's faces. Why not on public transport? Yeah, but Mary says, no. Please keep animals off buses. What about those of us who are allergic to them or even a little bit afraid of other people's fur babies? It is a fair point. And another person's raised questions about there might be young children who are also scared of them. Someone else says dogs on public transport. I wouldn't want to sit beside anyone with a dog. Terrible, says Lynn. Oh, well, you won't be sitting next to me then. Homai or whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program, whether it's dogs on buses or half-price transport for certain people and freebies, but not for everyone. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie is here with the headlines. Anaya Evie, mina pitipiti kōrero.
The Transport Minister says yesterday's budget will help bus companies attract more drivers to try and stabilise services that have seen hundreds of cancellations in Auckland and Wellington. Michael Wood told Checkpoint that there's a shortfall of about 460 drivers and the budget will provide about $50 million to councils to recruit more. He says overall there's an additional $140 million to councils to reintroduce services that have been cut. Wellington Police say that delays to commuters will remain into next week through the suburb of Newtown as they continue their investigation into the fatal Loafers Lodge Hostel fire. The road was partially reopened earlier today. Inspector Dion Bennett says the cordon will remain as long as they carry out their investigation, which is being slowed over concerns about the safety of the building. Meanwhile, the local community is rallying around trying to support each other. One resident told RNZ's Jemima Houston for Checkpoint that people are stopping in shops for longer to talk and checking in with each other following the fire. The hostel residents were considered a big part of the community. And emergency management officials are warning people on both coasts of the North Island and on the west coast of the South Island to stay away from the shoreline following a large earthquake near New Caledonia. NEMA says there's not a tsunami risk, but there could be strong and unusual currents. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Wellington, as you heard in the news, through the weekend, Adelaide Road will remain open to southbound traffic only. Traffic detours will remain in place for northbound traffic, including on public transport. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Evie. Half-price power is one of the hidden budget bonuses, but just on Chatham Island. The government's spending close to $11 million setting up a wind turbine and battery system that will provide the island with renewable energy. It could save each household close to $1,500 a year in electricity costs. Just the thought of it has Chatham Islands Mayor Monique Kroon buzzing.
Look, we were so pleased to hear the news yesterday afternoon, and certainly as far back as I remember, and it's well over 20 years, affordable energy and alternative energy other than diesel generators has not come to fruition. It's been frustrating time. So starting off with a hydro and then a previous wind generator, and then being back on the diesel generators currently with the at times at $1.37 per unit. Currently it's about $1.14 per unit. So it is much welcome news, and especially to hear that our our electricity unit price will be half of what it is. So we've been currently paying, probably 5 times more than anyone in New Zealand, and probably the highest energy costs in the world.
Monique, let's be clear about those figures. So you've mentioned a couple there. So tell me again the unit price and give me the comparison for another part of the country so we can just get an idea of how much more you are paying.
So currently per unit, we're paying $1.14. I think in the metros in New Zealand, I think that's about 20 cents, and I think in rural communities it's about 30 cents per unit. So it certainly is very, very expensive, and during the winter is unaffordable for most households, and also for businesses who rely on, say, freezers. It's just unaffordable.
So what, do people go cold, turn off heaters, that kind of stuff?
Well, they might use a bit of wood and maybe turn lots of lights off. But sometimes you don't have that choice, and so what we have is a Heartlands office here, and we've had many whānau coming to Heartlands to see if they can receive some support, like heating subsidy, to help offset some of those high costs.
Why is it so expensive on the island?
We are 100% diesel generated. We've got to remember, we're a little island 800 kilometres out of the middle of nowhere, so there is a freight component to that diesel cost, and so that's, and then of course, just living here, there is always other extra costs, so that's part of why it is so expensive.
So it's just over $10 million that the government has allocated in the budget. Is that going to cover the whole project?
Yes, it does. It's more than covers the whole project, and there is some funding I put aside for project delivery, but I also understand there's also funding put aside for Stewart Island, who potentially may be looking at a similar system as we are hoping to install in the next year.
So, Monique, you mentioned that other projects, investors had a crack at that. Why hasn't anything worked out before?
I think the original decision to go with wind generators, which was back in 2010, these were French designed, and there was an Australian company who owned them. And they eventually went into liquidation, unfortunately, which left us with these wind generators that needed considerable money and investment to get them back up and running again. But just noting that the harsh, salty environment is, it really has a toll on equipment such as that. But the other thing was the wind generators didn't have any battery storage, so they were reliant on the diesel generators to be operating and running to be able to then have the wind interfacing with the system. So It wasn't actually probably a successful project, unfortunately.
Whereas this will be totally renewable energy. When do you hope it's up and running by?
Well, hopefully, I'd like to think a year. I think all systems are ready to go to start the project. But yeah, a year, 18 months, I think would be realistic.
And you're a windy paradise, so it's going to work out brilliantly, isn't it?
Yes. It's better finding the place where there's consistent wind rather than very, very strong winds, which we do experience at times. But I think they've done there's been a lot of work, research done. This project's been in the planning stage for at least two to 3 years. All it required was the funding, much needed funding.
Yeah, and is turning on the lights ever going to be as exciting when this happens? It's going to be great for you guys.
Well, it'd be more exciting getting the bill, getting the account when it's half of what it is now.
And that is the Chatham Islands Mayor, Monique Kroon there. It is 12 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. They're cute and cuddly with a powerful nose, and dogs are the latest tool Auckland Council is using in its fight against Kauri dieback disease. After 3 years of training, Pip, Mawhai and Marty have become the first specialist Kauri dieback sniffer dogs. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went out on the job with Marty.
Hey Marty, ready to come to work? Hi mister, how are you?
Hot on the trail, sniffing out forest threats. Marty's got an important job to do. 5 years ago, it was estimated 1 in 5 trees in the Waitakere Ranges were infected with Kauri dieback disease. Auckland Council's Sarah Killick says it's hard to track.
Kauri dieback disease is caused by a pathogen called Phytophthora agathodicida, or we say PA because it's a bit of a mouthful. And that's a soil-borne pathogen, so it is tiny, it's about 1/10 of a millimetre big, so you can't see it, and it's spread by movement of soil.
The pathogen infects the roots of the trees, stopping the uptake of water and important nutrients. So the tree essentially starves itself and loses its leaves, ending up with a very skeletal looking structure. And there's still no cure. The biggest tool is preventing the spread of the disease in the first place, through ongoing upgrades to tracks, limiting the transfer of the pathogen, cleaning stations, and of course detection. That's where Marty and Kayla come in.
You come here. You sit. Good. Ready?
Marty is one of 2 English Springer Spaniels, working alongside his mum Pip and a Yak Terrier Mawhai in the council's team of Kauri dieback sniffer dogs. It's taken 3 years of intensive training to get the dogs trained to sniff out the disease grown on oats.
Yeah, there are oats that are inside jars, and then they're put inside containered areas, and so the dogs are directed to sniff each area.
Sarah says the dogs have a huge advantage over lab testing because they can scan a wide area quickly.
Lab testing can take weeks, or does take weeks to get those results back. And for a place like a forest, that's fine, that's not necessarily, going anywhere. But at places like the ports, where we might have construction vehicles coming in, they are not going to be able to wait, weeks each time for those tests to come back. Same with in places like nurseries.
Today they're on the job at Kaipātiki Nursery in Birkdale. Here there are more than 70 different species of plants grown to be planted at different restoration projects across Auckland. Marty sniffs the plants, ensuring they are safe to be sold, especially vital if they're heading to areas like Waiheke or the Hauraki Gulf, which are free of Kauri dieback.
I'm down this way. Yes, good. Nice job, Marty.
Marty lies down if he detects one of the plants. Today it's this kahikatea plant.
So we're just taking the plant that Marty indicated on, and we'll take it for further testing. I'm just going to put it in a bucket so this doesn't spread anywhere further.
Kaipātiki Nursery is one of many that are learning to grow and sell Kauri plants safely. Nursery manager Derek Craig says at the moment Kauri aren't planted in many local parks and forests.
We're down to 4% of the previous population. It is a species on the edge of extinction. I mean, that is the hard fact. So my mind is we should be growing as many as we can and getting them back out. Our small effort is only a token or small, but it's still an effort. And a lot of these parks, there are hundreds of parks in Auckland. So to put a couple of kauri in each could be what saves them.
Now having the dogs around to check over the plants is a game changer. But he admits it's taking some getting used to.
Well, leapy, happy dog on top of my other plants was a bit nerve-wracking. It's just something we'd have to work with.
Kayla Wrench is Marty's handler. The pair have been living and working together for a year now. At just 2 years old, Marty is the youngest dog and full of energy. Kayla says he's come a long way.
It's taken a wee while to get him used to doing that because obviously the world is a big and exciting place, but he's getting really accurate, and as he's gotten older, he's a lot more confident. Yeah, pretty exciting.
Because he's still young, more mundane searches of vehicles are less exciting than a nursery, so today is a real treat.
And work is a lot of fun for him.
Time at home is much quieter to give Marty time to recuperate for his day job.
Do check out the video version of that story. It's fantastic. Filmed by Marika Habazi. It'll be on our website. Marty does look like he really loves his job. Okay, it is a beautiful mystery. 2 stunning photos of a local man mailed to a Dunedin art gallery with a handwritten note and a polite request. Please give one of the photos to the man in the picture and sell the other copy and give the man the money too. The photo's subject was snapped outside a dairy where he was asking for change. PC Art Gallery in Port Chalmers is keen to make good on the request, and co-owner Robert Scott joins us now. Kia ora, Robert. This is a great mystery, isn't it?
Kia ora. Yeah, it's a great story, yeah.
So any clues to where the letter has come from, who the photographer is?
No clues at all. The photo is actually signed, but it's very much a scribble, so we've got no idea who took it.
And have you found out who the character is in the photo?
Well, I've seen quite a bit in Port Chalmers. He's living in sheltered accommodation, and he's out and about on the streets a bit between jobs and just hanging out. So yeah, I've seen him a bit.
So what does he think of the whole thing?
He's pretty chuffed and surprised that someone would take a photo and then go to those links to help him out.
So tell us a bit more about the letters and the package that arrived. What else is in the note? Is it handwritten, any dates or clues?
Not any clues as such. We know the dates. We don't know it was taken on the 14th of this month. It arrived at our gallery on the 16th, and it is a handwritten note, and it's basically what you've said in terms of him wanting to help this guy out in terms of us selling it.
And there's a signature on the note, or?
There's a signature on the note, and it matches the signature on the photo. But we can't work out what it says.
And the gentleman in the photo, does he remember the photographer?
No.
What does he remember of the photo being taken, and is he fine with that photo going up for sale?
As far as we know, we haven't seen him for a few days, so we haven't been able to really follow up. My partner Dallas took a photo of him with the photo, and she sort of filled him in on stuff, but we haven't had contact with him since then.
Okay, so what happens now? What's your plan?
The plan is to put it up for sale, probably on Trade Me, and we will, as soon as we've got that set up, we'll have the link on our website. I'll give you the gallery's website. So it's PC Art, that's all PEASEA and then art.com. So we'll as soon as we're ready to put it for sale, we'll have that link on the website. And we'll let everyone know.
The photo itself, do you think this is just a casual snapshot? What's your feel about whether it's a professional photographer? Has anyone, given you any advice on that?
We haven't sought any expert advice, and just going from the photos we've had in our gallery before, I'd say it's a medium level. It's definitely not an amateur shot. It could be someone who's got quite a bit of photographic expertise or knowledge, because at first glance it looks pretty good, yeah.
And what would you hope to get for it, or is there any idea of what it is worth?
Very, very hard to say. I think with something like this that's got a great story behind it, I think that'll elevate the price quite a lot. So normally something like that might go for between $200 and $400, but with this story, I think it'll go for a bit more.
How do you feel about the fact that whoever took this photo chose to send it to your gallery to ask you to help?
Well, I think it was because it was Port Chalmers, and this is where this guy's living. And the photographer obviously had seen that we've got a gallery, just down the road from where this guy hangs out. So it was the obvious choice to bring it to us, I suppose.
Would you be keen to know who took the photo? I mean, I love a mystery, but I also love it to be solved.
Yes, well, I'm hoping with time we will find out who it is, and whether or not they come forward. And now it's been in the news as such. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It is a mystery.
Yeah, someone might recognise that signature. A little bit of a scrawl at the bottom of the letter, and also on the photo.
It's pretty hard to make out.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for that, Robert. We will watch with interest. That is Robert Scott from PC Art Gallery in Port Chalmers. As he said, when they've got the photo ready for sale, they'll put up the deets on their webpage, and the request is that money goes to the gentleman who is in the photo, who they have managed to track down. Do check out the picture. We'll put a link to it on our webpage. It's a gorgeous photo, and it's very cool to see the guy who was in the picture holding it. A lot of your feedback coming in on transport. Various orders. Let's start with the budget package with cheaper transport for under 25s, half price, and free for under 13s. Someone wants to know how much do they spend on the infrastructure around the cards and payments for public transport? Get rid of it and have free for all. Biggest barrier to public transport for those who don't use it is the hassle of a hop card. Another listener says half price for all the way. Another says it should be free for everybody, paid for by taking the money from road maintenance. Oh, I'm sure that'll thrill some people. There'll be heaps left over to rebuild the railways too, that from Norbert. Also on the theme of transport, but this is dogs on buses. This listener says, fully support dogs on buses. We have to drive everywhere because we have a dog. Another person, though, says, what if someone's dog is really smelly and they let them on next to other people? What about people who have been riding these buses to work and have dog hair allergies? And another says, I realise that dog travel is going to be at off-peak. But yeah, do they get the same access as normal people?
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. The Transport Minister insists the budget addresses many of the problems plaguing the public transport system. In an effort to encourage more usage, under 13s will be able to ride for free and under 25s will pay half-price fares. However, many cities have had to cancel bus services because of a driver shortage. Transport Minister Michael Wood has told Checkpoint the budget will help to attract and retain drivers.
We put about $60 million in the budget last year, and that's now reducing the shortfall. We've reduced the shortfall of drivers from about 860 at the end of last year to about 460 now. And there's further funding in this budget, about $50 million, and it's going to be really important in terms of stabilising the workforce, getting the services back to where they need to be.
Michael Wood says the budget also provides funding for councils to restore public transport to pre-pandemic levels. 5 people have been confirmed dead in the Loafers Lodge fire in the capital, and police now say the final toll is likely to be fewer than 10. Acting Wellington District Commander Inspector Dion Bennett says 4 bodies have now been removed from the lodge in the suburb of Newtown. Speaking to media this afternoon, he said the building is still too dangerous to safely get the 5th body out. Mr Bennett says urban search and rescue teams have been propping up the floor beneath to keep the search teams from falling through as they move through the building. Meanwhile, Wellington traffic will continue to be disrupted following the fire. Adelaide Road is open to traffic heading towards Wellington Hospital only, with the road from John Street to the Basin still closed for northbound traffic. Dion Bennett says the closure will continue into next week.
I acknowledge the disruption that this causes to local businesses and residents, and I'm forever thankful for their patience.
The cordon around Loafers Lodge has caused significant congestion for traffic getting to and from the city since Tuesday. The public's been warned to watch out for strong and unusual currents in the wake of a massive earthquake near New Caledonia. Civil Defence Emergency Management Director John Price says there's no tsunami risk to New Zealand from the 7.7 magnitude quake, but boaties should return to shore and no one should go near beaches, harbours, marinas, rivers or estuaries.
There will be potentially strong currents and surges that could injure or drown people. So there is a danger to swimmers, surfers, people fishing, anyone in or near the water close to the shore.
John Price says areas under threat include both coasts of the North Island from Cape Dainga to Whanganui on the west and down to Tolaga Bay on the east coast. The warning includes the west coast of the South Island. Two men arrested in Auckland after a teenager was shot in St Luke's in an act of road rage will keep their names secret for now. Emma Stanford has been at the Auckland District Court.
The pair appeared in the dock this afternoon, jointly charged with wounding with reckless disregard and injuring with reckless disregard. One of them has also been charged with unlawful possession of ammunition. On Tuesday night, a hatchback followed a minivan on the northwestern motorway before taking the St Luke's exit. A 15-year-old girl in the van suffered a gunshot wound when shots were fired from the hatchback. The two men were remanded in custody until their next appearances at the end of the month.
G7 leaders plan to send strong messages to Russia and China as they meet in Japan for 3 days of talks. The US is expected to announce fresh sanctions against Moscow. Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
The twin threats of Russian aggression and Chinese military assertiveness are set to dominate the talks as G7 members discuss how to deter any further changes to the status quo by unilateral force. They're also expected to discuss nuclear disarmament and North Korea's progress towards another nuclear weapons test. The summit will feature outreach sessions with invitees from outside the G7, such as Australia, India, Brazil, and representatives from Africa and the Pacific Islands. The G7's looking to bring in Global South countries which may remain neutral over the Ukraine war and open to Russia and China's influence.
The Waitangi Tribunal has found the Crown has breached its treaty obligations in its inquiry into Māori homelessness. The first stage of the inquiry into housing, policy and services from 2009 to 2021 is now complete. The tribunal found the Crown formulated a definition of homelessness in 2009 without adequate consultation with Māori and took no action to address the rising levels of Māori homelessness. The Crown concedes it breached the treaty in the early part of the inquiry's timeframe. A new hub for rangatahi in Hamilton will be an open all-hours safe place for vulnerable young teenagers and aims to get them back into the education system. The Kirikiriroa Family Services Trust is running the Play, Stay, Grow hub, which includes a music room, art room, gaming room and outdoor basketball court. Mikhail Harris-Hill will be going to the hub and says he hopes it keeps young people out of trouble.
Most of them are literally children, 12 to 14, and I believe that they think that's survival instinct because they've grown up in poverty or abuse or stuff like that. And with this, it can you can say sidetrack them, show them that there's a better path than ramming your car into a shop.
And an elderly Australian woman with dementia is in hospital with life-threatening injuries after being tasered by police at a care home. Officers were called to Yalambi Lodge in Cooma early on Wednesday after reports that 95-year-old Claire Noland was carrying a knife. The early morning incident has sparked an outcry and an investigation is underway. New South Wales Assistant Police Commissioner Peter Cotter has told media Ms Noland was found in her room armed with a steak knife. She began approaching police using a walking frame and was tasered. That's the news.
This week on Music 101, Wise Blood speaks about religion and her glowing heart ahead of her New Zealand show. Alistair Riddell from Space Waltz talks to me about Victory, the band's first album in nearly 50 years. And we celebrate the life of Barry Jenkin, aka Dr. Rock, with his legendary RNZ mixtape. Where you going with that? Music 101 with me, Charlotte Ryan, this Saturday from 1 p.m, right here on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. A tsunami marine advisory is in effect for northern and western coasts of the North Island and for the western coasts of the South Island. Expect strong and unusual currents and unpredictable surges at the shore. Please refer to civildefence.govt.nz for details and updates. Northland to Taranaki, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy. Possible thunderstorms in the west overnight and tomorrow. Gale northwesterlies in exposed places overnight and tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine spells, a few showers. Whanganui to Wellington, also Waded Upper, partly cloudy with the odd shower turning to rain at times tomorrow. Buller, Nelson and Marlborough, scattered rain, more widespread and possibly heavy about western Tasman. Canterbury, Otago Otago and Southland, periods of rain or drizzle and low cloud or fog at times. Westland and Fiordland, partly cloudy with scattered rain at times, but just the odd shower about the fjords. And Chatham Islands, a few showers today. Tomorrow, periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery with northeast gales. I will have your news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora. Hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A nursing student on the cusp of graduating says she's taking up a job in event management because the prospect of working in the field she studied is too grim. Student nurses spoken to by Checkpoint say they're frustrated by the lack of specific support for them in yesterday's budget. But the Health Minister assures them help is on the way. The names of the nursing students in Tom Taylor's report have been changed.
The investment we have made means over $1 billion has been spent on increasing wages and staff numbers this financial year, including $63 million for safe staffing levels that will allow for an additional 500 new nurses.
Grant Robertson with one of the headlines of yesterday's wellbeing budget. And today, Health Minister Aisha Verrill's gone one step further, promising help for nursing students juggling high-pressure work placements with the need to put food on the table.
I agree we need more support for student nursing trainees to make sure that when they hit those years with lots of placements and the costs of attending placements, that they don't drop out. And there's work underway in Te Whatuora on that now.
The Minister won't provide an exact timeline for this support, but says a workforce plan will be in place before the election. And she says the support will go beyond study.
There is no one thing that we're going to do to address retention and training in nursing. We're going to have to do a number of things. So even those students who are towards the end of their training will benefit from some of the measures we put in place in order to retain people once they are nurses and support them in their first few years of work.
But some students currently in the final stages of training say it may be too little, too late. Emma's almost halfway through the last year of her nursing degree at AUT. She says she can see a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not bright enough to keep her within the profession.
I've already got a job lined up for me that isn't in nursing.
What are you going to be doing?
I'm doing event management.
Emma wants to finish what she started, but with a $20,000 student loan hanging over her head, she says she won't earn enough to get by as a nurse. And the things she saw during her clinical placements made her wonder whether she'll be able to stick it out in the sector.
When they get paid shockingly, they get abused by patients and their families and everything like that when they're trying their absolute best. When they're short-staffed and they have way too many patients, an unsafe load of patients, they're not compensated.
Yesterday's budget provides $63 million to improve conditions for nurses and attract 500 more of them. Aisha Verrill says these nurses will come from both here and abroad.
We have to pursue both international and domestic recruitment, but for the longer term, it is really important to grow the number that we can train in New Zealand.
But Emma questions where the Kiwi nurses will come from, given so many she's met are getting ready to split.
They've already got plans to leave and go to Australia because they're getting paid sweet nothing. So that's my question, is where the hell are they going to find these nurses? Because they're gone.
Kimberly, a nursing student based in Masterton, says she'd heard former Health Minister Andrew Little telling Checkpoint last year that nursing students should be supported during their third-year placements. So leafing through yesterday's budget documents left her frustrated.
I was disappointed. Yeah, I was disappointed, to be honest, because I was kind of like, I had my hopes high.
Kimberly did a 6-week placement across the Remataka Ranges at Wellington Hospital. She says it came at a high cost. Staying at a backpacker's for $96 a night, she racked up a bill of about $4,000.
We have $1,000 for cost-related costs. That's for to cover childcare and stuff. So I saved that for my placements. I was able to use $1,000 there. And then I saved up some money when I was working towards my accommodation cost for my placement. And my husband paid the rest.
While Kimberly's determined to finish her degree, she says many of her peers are on the cusp of dropping out due to financial pressure. So while help may be on the way, it can't come soon enough.
A new hub has opened in Hamilton that will be an all-hours safe place to help vulnerable young teenagers get back on track. It comes after a spate of ram raids in Waikato, the latest of which saw 4 people arrested aged between 14 and 18 years old last month. Called Kimi Manakitanga, the hub is set up as a place to eat, hang out and sleep. Delphine Herbert is in Hamilton.
It's a hangout space designed for youth by youth.
and includes a music room, art room, gaming room and outdoor basketball court. For these teenagers, it's just what they wanted.
I want to live here, pretty much. It's really cool here. Everything's here. And, you can form a brotherhood here. So, yeah, everything that, a rangatahi would want is right here.
So anyone can just come here, it's just a safe place for you to be yourself and just have some alone time.
I'm just going to get mentored for a bit because I like working with people. I just want to be a part of it.
Michael Harris-Hill will be involved in the hub and hopes it will help to keep young people out of trouble.
The main focus was for the kids to get what they want instead of an adult making what the adult wants for the kids. Because if you get what the kids want, they'll be here all the time and hopefully pull them away from, all the ram raids and all that stuff.
The Kirikiriroa Family Services Trust is running the Kimi Manakitanga Place State Grow Hub, which will help provide wraparound support. Its chief executive, Nicole Coop, says some young people haven't been back to school since the COVID lockdowns and have become disenfranchised. She hopes the hub will provide a circuit breaker.
We do have a number of youth that have been disenfranchised since COVID in particular. Our role is just to point them in a direction or a pathway or many pathways that they can choose to go down. One of them may be education, employment, something occupational.
The service is partly funded through Hamilton Council's crime prevention initiatives. It will also help the police to find safe places to house young people who may be at risk or in unsafe environments. Minister for Prevention of Family and Sexual Violence, Marama Davidson, wants to see more programs like this set up around the country.
We can interrupt crime and violence over the next couple of generations, or we can see another 200 years of intergenerational violence. And so this is exactly what the solutions are.
The Prime Minister Chris Hipkins missed an appointment on the basketball court, but made it in time to join the celebration.
No young person was born wanting to go on and become a young offender. That actually, if you give them better options, they will choose the better options. But so often they haven't had those. And this is an opportunity for us to change that and to say, actually, there's a better life ahead.
It is 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to a bit more of your feedback now, this time on prescriptions. And this is the government announcing yesterday it's waiving that $5 co-payment for prescriptions. We're all going to be free. And National doesn't agree entirely with the policy. This person says, imagine asking a busy health professional like a pharmacist to collect over $600 million worth in individual $5 script fees and then have to validate community services cards. What an administration burden. Another says the prescription charge does not go to the pharmacy, it goes to the government. Bargain chemists have been paying the government, and that's from Tony, who says he's not a pharmacist. And someone else says, good evening, Luxon and his alternative prescription charge policy is a joke. I know several millionaires with gold cards, and I regularly see a former National Prime Minister travelling on the Kapiti line using his gold card. I'm sure he will be pleased that Luxon's policy will not exclude him. That feedback from Terry. Thank you for getting in touch. On the subject of Kmart, and this is the tray that's got the sort of little yicky beetles in it. This person says that's what you get with cheapo imports. All our wood, and we have to import breadboards, that person says. 16 minutes after 6 now. The G7 summit is kicking off in Japan and will focus on Ukraine, the threat of China, climate change and international trade. Japan also wants to discuss the need to stop the further spread of nuclear weapons. The talks are being hosted in Hiroshima. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is also in Japan, as the ABC's James Oaten reports.
Ukraine today might be East Asia tomorrow. That's a warning Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has given before. It's a not-so-subtle remark that what Russia is doing to Ukraine, China might try against Taiwan. It's against this backdrop of conflict and uncertainty that world leaders are gathering in Hiroshima.
It seems like the world is currently at a very, very difficult point in terms of nuclear stability.
That's Kauri Wallace, an expert in international security at Kanagawa University.
Over the last decade, and particularly the last few years, the concern about nuclear stability has increased. With the implied threats that we've heard about the use of nuclear weapons in Europe, potentially by Putin, and the increasing testing by North Korea of missiles capable of striking Japan and the US, potentially with nuclear payloads.
For survivors of the Hiroshima bombing, they've been calling for a nuclear-free world for decades. Hiroshi Harada was only 6 when he survived the blast.
We were exposed to very strong heat rays. People's bodies were burned by the heat rays. To be more specific, their skin melted and hung. They suddenly lost their lives and became blackened corpses. These tragic experiences must never happen again.
He agrees the threat of nuclear destruction is back to worrying levels.
I worry that Russia may be short-sightedly thinking that it's okay for their country to use nuclear weapons, as a matter of course when it comes to the survival of their country.
While the G7 location may send a powerful message on the matter, the reality is G7 nations, the US, France and the UK all possess nukes. Experts say deterrence will be a key theme this meeting, focusing on immediate threats. That includes condemnation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and North Korea's nuclear program, as well as concerns against Chinese aggression in the region. Reuters news agency is reporting G7 leaders plan to tighten sanctions against Russia. This year's G7 meeting has also been expanded. Some attendees, notably Australia, shared G7 concerns about Russia and China, but emerging powers, Indonesia and Brazil, have taken a more neutral stance. Robert Dujarric is the director of the Institute of Contemporary Asian Studies at Temple University.
Tokyo realistically knows it's not going to push them to an anti-China position, but is to show them that they have also an interest in cooperating with Japan, to maybe warn them about being more dependent on China, and to basically compete for their attention and their support.
A long-term play in a game of strategic competition.
Climate change protesters disrupting traffic in Wellington has become a common sight in recent months. Meanwhile, in South Australia, protesters who disrupt traffic there could now face a $50,000 fine or 3 months in prison under proposed laws that have passed the state's lower house. It comes in response to Extinction Rebellion protesters who stopped peak hour traffic in Adelaide. Civil rights campaigners say lawmakers have gone too far. The ABC's Angus Randall has the details.
When a government wants to, it can move lightning fast. On Wednesday, Extinction Rebellion caused traffic chaos in Adelaide's CBD when a protester suspended herself above one of the city's busiest streets. Yesterday, the state's lower house passed tough new anti-protest laws. Peter Malinauskas is South Australia's Premier.
Repeat offenders seem to be breaking the law with a degree of impunity, and when that starts to occur in a way that substantially compromises public convenience, the ability to be able to do their jobs, for our emergency service workers to be able to focus on theirs, then I think there's a need for government and the parliament to respond, and that's what we started the process of doing yesterday.
The proposed changes passed with bipartisan support. If it passes the upper house, the maximum fine for obstructing a public place will jump from $750 to $50,000, and judges could also hand down a 3-month jail sentence. The proposed laws could be amended in the upper house, although if the Liberals and Labor continue supporting the bill, it will pass without issue. SA Law Society President James Marsh says passing laws at this speed means legal experts can't provide proper scrutiny.
I would have liked to have seen the legislation scrutinised closely by our Criminal Law Committee and our Human Rights Committee, and they just won't have had that opportunity.
Other states have also increased penalties for protesting in recent years. Protesters in Tasmania now face a year in jail. In New South Wales, it's 2 years. Bill Brown is the Democracy and Accountability Program Director at the Australia Institute. He says these laws may backfire.
Cracking down on protesters can draw more attention to their cause. And when that reaction seems so disproportionate to the nature of the offence, it engenders sympathy for those protesters. So I'd be very surprised if these laws have the effect that they're apparently intended to.
The SA Premier says the state courts haven't handed out a $750 public obstruction fine in at least 30 years. So while a bigger fine is a possibility, it's ultimately unlikely to be used. But Bill Brown says once laws are passed, the government has little control over how a judge applies them.
I would think that if in the previous decades there's never been a protest offence in South Australia that warrants a $750 fine, it would be a huge mistake to go up to a $50,000 fine. But we know that these laws can be enforced with serious consequences, because we have the example in New South Wales of someone being sent to jail. And even with that decision being overturned, she did spend time in jail. Once you pass these laws, they get applied, and ultimately the Parliament has to deal with that and the consequences of that decision.
The South Australian Parliament next sits on May 30th.
In northern Italy, deadly floods continue to wreak havoc. They're the worst in a century. At least 13 people have been killed in Emilia-Romagna and thousands are now homeless. Mayor Michele De Pascale described the devastation.
The flood that hit my city and my region, especially Romagna, has been like someone pointed the perfect storm. And the facts have been catastrophic. Many people have lost their homes, their possession, some on their life. We have in the town of Ravenna 25,000 people out of home.
Residents say the clean-up is being conducted by locals and the authorities are nowhere to be seen. One 97-year-old woman had to leave her bedroom in a rubber dinghy. The BBC's Sofia Battiza has more.
I'm just south of Bologna and I'm standing right next to a river, one of the 21 rivers that broke their banks and inundated entire villages and towns here in the region. Several of those towns are still underwater as we speak. And where I am at the moment, people have told me that their village was taken over by mud and by water. They're very scared and they don't quite know what to do. Several drowned in their own homes and one woman was dragged for more than 20 kilometres by the torrents before her body was recovered on a beach. The Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni held a crisis meeting yesterday. She said that the government is monitoring the situation and is ready to approve emergency aid. But people here have told us that they're very disappointed with how the government has been responding so far. You know, I spoke to somebody who's lived here for 70 years. He said he'd never seen anything like this. And, you know, I saw as he was trying to get rid of the water in his house with pots and pans and buckets and said there's been zero help from the government or any local authority. On top of that, there's been lots of people who are urging the government to put in place a national plan so that Italy can be better prepared to deal with floods caused by climate change.
Rafael Nadal will miss the French Open for the first time in 19 years after a hip injury ruled out the record 14-time men's singles champion. The 36-year-old Spaniard, who has won 22 major tennis titles, also says he plans to retire after next year's season. He says he didn't make the decision, his body did.
Today, still in a position that I am not able to feel myself ready to compete at the standards that I need to be. My ambition is to try to stop, to give myself an opportunity to enjoy next year. That's probably going to be my last year in a professional tour.
The tennis champion has won 70 other titles and spent 209 weeks at world number one, the sixth longest amount of time in history. But he hasn't played professionally since the hip problem flared up at the Australian Open in January. Former world number two, Alex Correctra, says it was a shock to hear Nadal talk of retirement.
I was not expecting Rafa to say today, I'm retired from tennis. I was expecting, okay, give me time. Just give me time to see if I'm going to be able. And if for some reason he's going to be ready for 24, I think it will be the last time that he feels like he's committed physically and mentally to do that effort again. And it will be awesome to see him playing in some tournaments and everybody pay tribute to him, recognition to him. And that will be the best thing it can happen. So I don't think he should go farther than that. And hopefully he's going to be ready for that. I think by taking the time now with the pressure out of, okay, I don't have the goal of being ready for Roland Garros, knowing Rafa, I think he will make it.
Virtual reality headsets are set to dramatically change health examinations, particularly in aged care. New technology about to be trialled in Australia lets doctors see and hear everything a nurse examining a resident experiences, even if they're hundreds of kilometres away. The ABC's Norman Hermont has this story.
Okay, Eve, I'm just going to put these on because this will show the doctor what I can see.
This is a simulated examination with a difference in Melbourne's La Trobe University.
Can you feel any pain there?
No.
Nursing student Heidi Burrell is wearing an augmented reality headset as she examines a stand-in patient. If she were doing this for real, a doctor would be seeing and hearing her every move and speaking with her through headphones.
Okay. Very exciting. Definitely, you've got the knowledge from a doctor literally next to you.
Okay, Jeff, we're just going to pop this on your finger and get a few readings for us.
At La Trobe's Digital Innovation Hub, the HoloLens headset is being put through its paces.
Perfect.
Wireless Bluetooth monitors gather vital signs. And in another room, a doctor is watching it all.
No, that's good. The numbers are coming through great. Thank you.
Remote exams surged in Victoria during COVID, and up to 400 patients a day are seen by the state's virtual emergency department. Director Dr. Lauren Scher says this new technology is now set to be trialled in aged care.
We are really bringing our eyes into the consultation. So we are there with the nurse, seeing what they're seeing, hearing what they're hearing. It's really taking us into the room.
I've told her about your sore neck.
At Kooryong Health, about 320 kilometres from Melbourne, a demonstration reveals how remote exams work now. They can be awkward, with a nurse struggling to hold an iPad or phone, and sometimes a second staff member is needed. Associate nurse Marsh Suingao says going hands-free will be a big help.
I'd say with augmented reality and with the headset, that would be a better system, I think, maybe in the future. Do you want to lie down?
Okay. There are potential challenges, such as poor internet access and having residents adjust to nurses wearing headsets. But Dr. Lauren Scher believes this technology can be transformational.
This is going to improve care not just for patients in aged care. This is going to improve care for patients in remote and rural settings where there really is staffing deficits at the moment. And it's going to be a game changer for video health.
OK, the final words tonight on dogs on public transport in Auckland. This person says they'll smell, and the owners always think it's fine for their dogs to come up and sniff people and slobber over them. A lot of children and adults don't like being in close proximity to dogs they don't like. But Claire from Wellington says great for the environment. Plus, dogs don't get drunk, throw up or pee as much as humans do on a Friday night. Thank you, Claire, for your feedback. Do have a great weekend. If you missed anything on Checkpoint, you can fill your boots on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from. We're back on Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Tēnā tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. Supports are being used to prop up the floor in the Loafers Lodge Hostel to enable Wellington Police to carry out their investigation into the fatal fire earlier this week. Inspector Dion Bennett says the safety of their teams is why police are taking their time in removing bodies, with 4 of the 5 they've located now removed. A trust that has opened a community hub in Hamilton is hoping it will help vulnerable teenagers either back into school or into training and work. And an emergency management officials are still warning to stay away from the coast due to the possibility of strong currents following a massive earthquake near New Caledonia. Those other headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Country life this week is in a milking shed with a difference.
Trying to find the perfect hind is hard work. The better suited ones have got a little bit of go amongst them.
They're putting cups on deer to extract rich milk destined for the Asian market.
I would compare it very similar to cow's milk, probably just a bit creamier just because of the fat and protein content.
Join Country Life Friday evening and Saturday morning just after the news at 7 on RNZ National and wherever you get your podcasts.
The time is 31 minutes past 6 and you're with me, Evie Ashton, through to 7 o'clock. Let's go now to Focus on Politics.
Bare bones and breadcrumbs or a big spending blowout. No frills or no thrills. This year's budget has proved a difficult one to define.
This is a positive and pragmatic budget.
This is a reckless, irresponsible blowout budget.
This is the blowout budget.
I commend the Wellbeing Budget 2023 to the House.
Kia ora ko Craig McCulloch aho and e te pūrongo tōranga pū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. As far as election year budgets go, this is not your typical fare. Less a lolly scramble, more hard-boiled, with Labour constrained by the tough economic conditions. It knew it needed to do something to relieve the red-hot cost of living, but not so much it would drive up inflation and make the problem worse. And so this is where Grant Robertson landed, a budget, he says, for the times we're in.
It is a budget that does exactly what it says on the tin.